Hello, good morning. Okay, so I am going to take my hat off. Yes. Okay, so today I'm going to read Mark chapter 8. I'm just going to jump right into it. In those days, the multitude being great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples into him and said to them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for diverse of them came from afar. So he's saying many people came from afar and they were following him. They were following him for 3 days. He doesn't want to send them away because they haven't eaten and they'll probably faint on the way home or on the way to get something to eat. So notice that in verse 2, he says, I have compassion on the multitude. If you guys are running a homework assignment, I want you to go through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and just read where Jesus does a miracle and look for the word compassion. And you'll probably find that most of the time it said that Jesus had compassion on the person or the group and he healed them and he healed them all. So yes, Jesus was led by the Spirit of the Lord. He's led by God. He only did what the Father did, and he only spoke what the Father said. And he was also led by compassion. So I think that's important because we, in today's time, have compassion for people, and it's okay to step out because we have compassion. All right, so continuing on. And his disciples answered him, From whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. And he commanded the people to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and brake, and gave to the disciples to set before them. And they did eat them before the people. And they had a few small fishes, and he blessed and commanded to set them also before them. So they did eat and were filled, and they took up the broken meat that was left, 7 baskets. Wow. So he had a few fish and he had 7 loaves, and he fed everybody, and everyone got full, and they had 7 baskets left over. And they that had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away. So Jesus feeds 4,000 people. And you know, in the Bible, when they state people, they state men. Women and children are assumed; they're included. So it was probably more than 4,000 people. The other thing I want to point out here is this is food multiplying, and this happens today. There are testimonies on this planet of people, soup kitchens that don't have enough food, and they have a whole bunch of people needing food, and they just keep serving, and everyone gets served. I have a personal friend who he brought people home to his house. I think it was around 30 people, and he had 1 pack of hot dogs. And by the end of the evening, everyone had eaten, everyone had hot dogs, and they still had a few left over. Or I think they ran out after the last person was served. But just, yeah, I'm not saying this to speak it as a common thing. I'm saying it to say that God is still works miracles. God still works today. The things that happened in the Bible back then still happen today. That's why Jesus told us the way he's walking, the way he's serving, do that. Follow him. And even Paul tells us that later. He says, hey, if you're going to follow me as I follow Jesus Christ. Follow me. So, yeah, I'm just saying that. Food multiplying. Believe it, it can happen. Having faith. And straightway he entered into a ship with his disciples and came into the parts of Dalmathia. And the Pharisees came forth and began to question with him, seeking of him a sign from heaven, tempting him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, Why do this generation seek after a sign? Verily I say unto you, there shall no sign be given unto this generation. And he left them and entered into the ship again, departed to the other side. Okay. So the Pharisees came to him. They wanted a sign. and they were trying to tempt him. So they were trying to tempt him to demonstrate the power of God, to give them a sign so they would believe. That's interesting, isn't it? Because, or I'm thinking he'll show them a sign and then they'll believe. But apparently he didn't show them a sign. He sighed. He said, this generation seeks after a sign. So I wonder about this verse because there are people who they ask God for a sign and God gives them a sign and they believe. So maybe God knows the heart in this matter. Maybe God knows that they're not going to believe even if they've seen a sign. I don't know. That's just the question. I'm assuming, I guess I would assume that here, that their heart is not in the right place. And even if Jesus gave them a sign, they wouldn't believe. It would be like Jesus is performing for them, is submitting to them. And that's probably why he didn't give them a sign. Okay, and he left them, and entering into the ship again, departed to the other side. So it seems like he's going back and forth on the sea, going to different cities. He's in a boat with his disciples going back and forth. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, neither had they in the ship with them more than one loaf. And he charged them, saying, take heed, beware the leaven of the Pharisees, and of the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. And when Jesus knew it, he saith unto them, why reason ye, because ye have no bread? Perceive ye not yet, neither understand? Have ye in your hearts yet hardened? So I guess if they didn't have understanding, they didn't try to figure out what he was saying. They just felt guilty because they didn't have any bread. I guess that's hard-hearted, because that's kind of how Jesus is saying it here, that they don't perceive it, they're having a hard heart. So maybe they should have soft hearts and open their hearts and try to see what Jesus is saying in the different point of view. Okay, then he says, having eyes, see ye not, and having ears, hear ye not, and do ye not remember? When I break the 5 loaves among 5,000, how many baskets full of fragments took ye up? They said unto him, 12. And when the 7 among 4,000, how many baskets full of fragments took ye up? And they said, 7. And he said unto them, how is it that ye do not understand? So basically Jesus is saying, don't worry about the bread. We just fed 4,000 people with 7 loaves, and we had 7 baskets left over. We just fed 5,000 people with loaves, and we had many baskets full of fragments, 12 baskets left over. So he's not speaking about bread. He's speaking about the leaven of the Pharisees, which is the ways of the Pharisees. And I think he explains it. Okay. No, he doesn't explain it in this one. But the leaven of the Pharisees, so leaven makes things rise. You put a little leaven in the bread and it causes the whole bread to rise. You know, when you cut bread, you could see the holes and the chunks in it and everything. That's because leaven causes it to rise. So he says, be aware. Take heed, be aware, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Beware of that. So don't take on their ways. Don't let their ways be a part of your ways. Be aware of that. Okay, so I'm on verse 22 now. And he come to Bathsheba, and they bring a blind man unto him, and besought him to touch him. So they wanted Jesus to touch this blind man, so he can see. And he took the blind man by the hand, and led him out of the town. And when he had spit on his eyes, he put his hands upon him. He asked him if he saw aught. Like, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see men as trees walking. The blind man says this. After that, he put his hands again upon his eyes and made him look up, and he was restored and saw every man clearly. So Jesus prays for him again and has him look up, and then he can see everyone clearly. So note that Jesus prayed for this man twice. Okay, so because Jesus prayed twice, that means we can pray like 1,000 times. Okay, the reason why I say this is because you are a son of God. You have the spirit of the living God living inside you. The same spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, it lives in you. So when you pray for someone, you know the end from the beginning. No matter what you see, you decide how this thing is going to end. And then you just pray and you command it to be like you see it in the end. And you don't give up. So I guess I'm getting at this notion of no one likes a person, well, no one wants to fight a person who wants to fight. No one wants to fight a person who likes the fight. They just keep going and they're persistent and they just never give up. And they will wear you down. Well, sickness and disease is of the devil, is of a cursed creation, and we, by the word of God, speak the word of God, and we cause those things that be not as though they were. We are down here to see things that are not like heaven, and we're to make it like heaven. And there's no sickness, disease in heaven. So be persistent. If Jesus prayed twice, we can pray twice. We can pray more than twice. I've been in a situation where I saw a friend pray for a man 26 times. He had 5% hearing in this ear and 95% hearing in this ear. And they prayed for him 26 times in this ear until he had 100% hearing. And then this one had 100% as they were praying. So don't give up. Okay. Verse 26, and he sent him away to his house, saying, neither go into the town, nor tell it to any in the town. Okay, so Jesus took this blind man by the hand and he took him out of the city and he prayed for him and he got healed. And he told him, don't tell anybody in the city and don't go in the city. Okay. Why did he do that? Well, if you read before, he couldn't even go in the city because everybody heard about the great miracles. So I think he's avoiding this here as well. And Jesus isn't seeking glory for himself. He's not telling, hey, go tell everybody what I did so he could get a following, so he can have followers. Jesus is not doing that here. He simply gets the guy healed. He cares for the man specifically, gets the man healed and restored. Here's the other thing. He took him out of the city. Usually blind people are outside of the city begging, or they're outside of religious buildings and temples begging. This man was outside. He took him back to a place where probably he was used to, and then he spat on his eyes. He spit on his eyes, which is something they used to do to people back then. People who were blind and who were deaf and dumb, meaning they couldn't speak, they blamed it on a curse on their family. They blamed it on their parents or their grandparents, and they thought it was right to spit on them sometimes to confirm, hey, you're cursed. So they would spit on him. So here's Jesus doing the things that they did, except it is to bring life and not to condemn. It is what I'm getting at here is this man was set free physically, but he was also set free mentally and emotionally because of the way Jesus healed him. And Jesus only does what the Father does. So God knows this man very well and healed him completely. Okay, I would submit this to you. Read it over, think on it. Yeah, God is a whole God. He fills the cup to overflowing. And he's going to heal not just your physical ailments, but your whole body. And anyone who says you have to choose, well, I think they're probably of an evil spirit because God doesn't do things halfway. All right, so, and Jesus went out and his disciples into the towns of Caesarea Philippi. And by the way, he asked his disciples, saying unto them, whom do men say that I am? And they answered, John the Baptist. But some say Elijah, and others, one of the prophets. And he said unto them, but whom do you say I am? And Peter answered and says unto him, thou art the Christ. And he charged them that they should tell no man of him. So basically, Jesus and the disciples are going from town to town. They're preaching. They're getting people healed. They're bringing people into the kingdom. And along the way, Jesus says, hey, who do people say that I am? And his disciples answer. Some people think he's John the Baptist. Some people think he's Elijah from the Old Testament. And some people think he's one of the prophets. Okay, well, Herod thought he was John the Baptist reincarnated because John's head was cut off. A lot of people say he's Elijah because there was a prophecy saying that the Messiah is going to come in the spirit of Elijah. He's going to be announced in someone through the spirit of Elijah, which is basically John the Baptist. And then the third one, others think he's a prophet. Muslims think Jesus is a prophet. Buddha, they think Jesus is a prophet. Other religions, they mention Jesus and they say he's a great man, he did miracles, and they labeled him as a prophet. So the disciples answering Jesus really covered the gamut when they said John the Baptist, Elijah, or a prophet. But then he says, well, who do you say I am? And Peter says, thou art the Christ. You are the Christ. And Christ means anointed one. So Peter is saying, you are the anointed one. This is important because at this time, the Spirit of God did not come and stay on a person, let alone dwell in a person. So for Peter to recognize you are the anointed one, he recognized him being a Savior, Messiah, Son of God, great things. And so Jesus says, don't tell anybody this, okay? And I think it's interesting that Jesus is telling the evil spirits to stop saying who he is. And then now he comes to humans, his disciples, and he's telling them not to say who he is, which again is telling a lot of things in this world, a lot of things in your life, they happen in the spirit before they happen in the natural. You may not believe that. I understand. But I think reality has three parts. It's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. I think there's three parts. And if you don't understand the spiritual part, you probably only understand 2/3 of reality. I want to submit that for your thinking because the spiritual world is real. Okay, so yeah, one more thing. We can no longer say, well, I don't know, or I need more information in that area, because we've got the collective knowledge of humanity at our fingertips through our cell phone with our unlimited data plans. Okay, so moving on. Jesus is coming death, okay? This is verse 31. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected of the elders and of the chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he spake that saying openly, and Peter took him and began to rebuke him. Okay, so Jesus, now that he realizes that they realize he's the Son of God, he's the Christ, he's the anointed one, then now he can reveal more of himself. He can reveal more of his plan, and he does. And he basically spells it out. He's going to suffer. The elders are going to reject him, the priests, the scribes, and then he's going to be killed. And then he's going to rise again. So this is telling again. See, here's the thing. People believe that seeing is believing, but is the opposite that's true. Believing is seeing. You first dare to believe. And when you do, that's when you'll see. So here's his disciples. Just the fact that they walked with him, they're daring to believe. And in that, he satisfied their belief. He gave them something as proof of what their faith was doing, what their belief was showing. And then when they went a little deeper, then he revealed a little deeper. So that's telling. There's a verse that says, God says, draw nigh unto me and I'll draw nigh unto you. So I will encourage people who have been walking with God or believed in God and you no longer believe in God. I'm encouraging you, dare to believe again. Read this book and dare to believe what it says. So believing is seeing, not seeing is believing. So he says this to the disciples, but Peter took him and began to rebuke him. A rebuke basically is telling someone what to do, okay? All right. But when he had turned about and looked on his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter, saying, Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of man. Okay, so Peter is telling Jesus, no, this isn't going to happen. You're not going to die. And Jesus looks around and sees all his disciples witnessing this. And he says, yeah, get thee behind me, Satan. He's calling Peter Satan. This is right after he says to Peter, this is right after Peter understood that he was the Son of God, that he was the Christ. Now he's saying Satan. He's calling Peter Satan. So we are fickle as humans. We can flip pretty quick. And this kind of shows it here. He says, Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of man. Okay, recognize this. Let me read it a different way. Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, spirit of Satan. You're not valuing the things of God. You're valuing the things of man. Okay, so let me say it a different way. Valuing the things of man is like valuing the things of Satan. Valuing the things of man over the things of God is like the devil. I encourage you to think on this, okay? Not all the things of man is evil, but when you put it before God, yeah, it's probably evil. All right, moving on, verse 34. And when he had called the people unto him, with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, but whosoever shall lose his life for my sake and the gospel's sake shall save it. For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him also shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he come into the glory of his Father with the holy angels. These are heavy words. These are amazing words. So why does he say this right after he rebukes Peter and calls him Satan and says that he's valuing the things of man over the things of God? Because he wants us to deny ourselves. He wants us to deny the things of man and value the things of God first and over the things of man. So he wants us to take up our cross and follow him. Now, the cross is a place where things are cursed and taken care of. So we take up our cross, meaning we take those things that are hindering us, that are the things of man, and we put them on this cross. And we put them behind us, and we deny ourselves. We deny our man. So, and he says, if you try to save your life, you'll lose it. And if you lose your life for Jesus' sake and the good news' sake, then you'll save it. Kind of seems upside down, right? If you want life, lose it. But if you try to preserve life, you're not going to save it. Okay. And then he goes on even more to say, what does it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world but lose his soul? It doesn't really profit you. And if I know people who have gained the whole world and they're unhappy, and happiness is an inside job. So that's a soulish problem. That's a spiritual problem. And I know people who, they don't have very much, but they're happy. And they're so happy that people around them they're kind of jealous because they're happy. It's just, I think it's amazing. I love that. Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? What on this planet is worth more than your soul? What? This is just a question. What is more than your soul? There's some people who, they would exchange their soul for money and riches to be a great artist or a great actor. But I say it's not a good deal. And they probably will tell you that. Yeah. I heard an artist say he gave his soul to the devil, and all he got was a Happy Meal with not so good toys. Okay. Whosoever therefore shall be ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him shall the Son of Man be ashamed when he comes into the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So basically, if we deny Jesus, he'll deny us. If we deny Jesus here, he'll deny us before the Father and the holy angels. So he's also saying, if you're not ashamed of him, if you're able to proclaim his name on this earth in your life, and don't be ashamed to be brave and courageous, then he'll proclaim your name before God. You'll be known. Your name will be in the book of life. I just think that's amazing. Okay, that was the last verse. This is the end of chapter 8. Have a good day. Love you all. Bye.